On to this story now. The South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry has dubbed President Cyril Ramaphosa's mission to Ukraine and Russia, together with other African leaders, as an important historical trip. Sacci says the fact that Russia and Ukraine leaders were willing to even meet with African peace mission leaders is a sign in the right direction. We're joined now by Advocate Mtho Xulu, the President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Advocate, thank you very much for your time. This meeting should mean a lot. This means a lot that you've taken as a business organization such a huge interest in this mission by African leaders to the Ukraine and Russia. This is quite important to the business environment here at home as well.
Good afternoon, Xolani and the viewers. Certainly, it's important because if you look at the 16-17-month order of the Ukraine-Russian war, it has a devastating consequences for the African economy and the South African economy. So we have been affected by what's happening in the Ukraine war, and the numbers have been showing over the past year, 18 months on what the impact of this geopolitical crisis have actually meant for the business community. So we've been paying keen interest. We've been obviously meeting with the business formations of both countries to try and find and protect the economic relationships. And we are happy that now that the political leaders have also stepped up to try and stop the carnage, because the longer it goes on, the more problems it causes for the African economy. So we welcome this, and we understand that this war is also becoming a business war, and we need to have a voice as the business community.
For the continent, where have we felt this the most? Because we know that when it comes to grain and fertilizer, it's quite an important export of the Ukraine. But where have we felt this the most, where we absolutely need this war to end so that the pain can stop?
Yeah, certainly the direct impact has been on grain and fertilizer. And obviously that has a knock-on effect because food affects every citizen on the continent. So any increases around food is naturally going to have a knock-on effect across the economy, because it puts pressure on existing incomes. So you have, from a labor point of view, a need to increase those wages, which also increases the input cost for anything that is produced on the continent. And also the uncertainty around the energy availability, because we saw some of our biggest trading partners, even in Europe, being under pressure from an energy point of view. That also passed on uncertainty to the African economy. And lastly, we also think that the ongoing anxiety of the global economy caused by this war has also affected Africa, because now we are looking, Africa is being looked at with various suspicion in terms of where we are lying. Even though Africa takes a non-aligned position, there will be pressure on us to take a decision and protect the economy of Africa. So it's been on the price level and its impact at that level, but also at economic policy level and global trade relations, because there's this anxiety and suspicion on how then to deal with Africans, depending on which side of the war they choose to stand.
We've also seen how this war has entangled most of Europe when it comes to our sanctions and other negative impacts. And we've seen how our stance as South Africa as well, as far as our relationship with Russia is concerned, has brought on some fears about our non-aligned stance being one that favors Russia. Do you think this surgeon to the Ukraine and Russia will sway anyone who feels that South Africa is unfairly supporting Russia? Do you think this is going to move the needle with the Americans and their stance? Because now, with AGOA as well, we are working on thin ice.
Well, we certainly hope so. I think the government and DERCO remains the best place people to talk about what this non-aligned stance actually means. But what we are saying as a business committee is that this initiative actually is very constructive, because we are not sitting back as Africans and hoping for the whole way to take decisions that will affect us. We are happy that leaders are now coming up to say, in our own unique situation, this is the solution that we are proposing, because this is the devastation that we are trying to prevent. So we are hoping that the world will look at this initiative as a genuine initiative to bring about peace across the world, but also making sure that there's economic stability with our existing trade partners, and the potential that it can come from any other relationship. I mean, the BRICS summit that we are hosting this year as Africa, we were hoping it was going to be an initiative, for instance, to continue to build a market for African goods, but it's been overshadowed by the politics of BRICS and the politics of the war, and the economy itself is suffering from a big opportunity that we may not be able to capitalize on. So we are really hoping that this initiative must be taken in the good faith that I think is being proposed, that Africans are trying to provide solutions to the world and ultimately provide economic stability and bring us back to a state of peace and, the globalization and integration of African trade with the rest of the world.
Advocate Xulu, I know this is a difficult question for most leaders, whether in politics or in business or civil society, but where do you think this could take us? If the war doesn't end, if the war lasts another 16, 17 months from where you are sitting, how further could the hurt be for South Africa as the gateway, as we've still been called and viewed, to the rest of the continent?
Well, it can only have terrible consequences for the world and for Africa, because the longer we are in this war, the more polarized we become. I mean, everyone is being pulled, whether west or east. And we do not want to live in a world like that. In this century, we are hoping to have a greater unity across the world, support for the global south, and making sure that we build multilateralism that is more conducive for shared growth. So a war like this just simply polarizes it and defeats our initiatives in that regard, because this war is also becoming a proxy war between the East and the West. And Africa is going to be devastated, and we're going to lose our opportunity for this African century. So an ongoing war, even if it's not fought on our soil, has a problem for us, because it interrupts our commitment in the new world to be able to build shared prosperity. And, in a war, you can't have shared prosperity with this size of economies that are warring and tearing each other apart.
Advocate, there would always be detractors, and there are detractors in this instance. Many people even questioning the cost that was actually spent, the money that was spent to actually for this particular trip. What do you say to those people who are detractors when it comes to these particular attempts to end the war in Ukraine?
Well, we'll urge anyone who is still, skeptical of these initiatives and the costs associated with, to understand the fact that if we truly believe that South Africa is part of the global community, we can't cut corners on investing in peace. South Africa continuously invests in peace on the continent and supports other initiatives globally. I mean, our associations with the various multilateral organizations, it costs us money all the time. So it will be naive and unfair to isolate this one trip as if, it's breaking the bank. We spend a lot of money building multilateralism on the continent and globally, and we pay a lot of fees in making sure that we sustain a department like DERCO and our international footprint of embassies. I mean, that is the cost of multilateralism. That's the cost of being part of a global community. So to say that a mission like this, is wasteful is not to understand how diplomacy works and how to become part of the global community. So we spend a lot of money as a country in any case to be running these things, and I think people must understand that this is just part and parcel of the global budget that as presidency and the DERCO has in positioning South Africa as a global player.
Advocate Mtho Xulu is the president of Sacci. Thank you very much for your time.